Welcome to another episode of the Animates, in which we are discussing the Hercules and Aladdin animated series with our special guest host, Evan.
Hey guys, Evan here. What? Oh,
We
that's
maybe
bad.
should have asked, do you want to be Evan or GA villain in the
You
context of all this?
you can just do Evan or GA villain or both of them. I
Okay.
answer to both.
Little inside baseball that we're on first name basis with someone who you've probably watched Disney villains AMV by, because he's made some of the best and most popularizing ones.
Aw, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And we thought your expertise would lend themselves very well to what was, a big staple of cartoons around the 90s. And I find it interesting to think about in that, like, Disney is, of course, a juggernaut of film, but they were so involved with, theatrical animation. They had a lot of famous animated series, but you just don't always think of them in the same context as, like, what we generally cover here on Animates. Like, it's
Mhm.
not always, oh yeah, the classic cartoons, Aladdin and He-Man. But within their own circles, they were these big staples and landmarks for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I was a kid growing up, I was really like you know how you had like the Nickelodeon kids, the Cartoon Network kids, the Disney Channel kids. I was always a Toon Disney kid.
Hmm.
After we got like satellite TV when I was younger, and so like all of the staples that were on Toon Disney, which for those of you who don't know, which were basically like the Disney afternoon shows from the '90s, reruns of those, as well as like some newer animated series that they were putting out in the early 2000s, like House of Mouse, The Legend of Tarzan. But those were what I really found my niche as a child, and so I would look forward to Aladdin and Hercules basically every single day. So those were like my obsessions when I was a wee little Evan. So yeah.
I want to say that Aladdin was their first. No. Was Little Mermaid their first sort of movie-based
Yeah,
adventure
Little Mermaid was
cartoon?
first. Hmm.
And then I
Hmm.
want to say Aladdin was after that. That was the next one they did.
Yeah, Aladdin came very quickly after the first movie. Well, because Return of Jafar was 1994, which was and the first movie was 1993. So the Aladdin series was really close after that because it was a part of the whole package that they were releasing at the time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Return of Jafar is the first 4 episodes of the series, I believe, isn't it? Or the first 3. Which explains why the animation style is wildly inconsistent in The Return of
Oh yeah.
Jafar, because a different studio animated it every 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, like
It was one.
there's that dramatic change halfway through, especially.
It was the first YouTube reanimated collab where the artists of drastically different styles reanimate a cartoon
Yeah, it
chunk
does
by
feel like
chunk.
that.
Yes. They're like, nobody will notice. They're kids. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, I
Hey,
didn't notice as a kid, so it's I'm
No,
sure
I
it's
didn't.
fine.
I mean, I
hey,
actually
I
saw
just
Return of Jafar before I ever saw like the first Aladdin movie. So like that was like
Oh,
my baseline
oh,
going into things. So yeah.
oh, that's very strange.
I know. Well, it's because like Aladdin was on it was released on VHS with like the Black Diamond ones, but I was a kid when they were doing like the Masterpiece collection. And so it was like back in the Disney vault at that time, but the direct-to-video sequels
oh.
were still on VHS. So
Ah,
that's why I was
okay.
able to see Return of Jafar first.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew this. Interesting bit of trivia about
I
you.
Yeah.
knew about I knew about the Disney Vault, but it seems wildly counterintuitive to me to like market Aladdin spin-offs while it's hard for kids to watch Aladdin. Uh,
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Like, hey, can
Definitely.
we watch the first one? No, it's not available.
To be
if
fair
only
though,
we
that
could.
was that was oh, that was back in the day of like the Blockbuster rental stores. So I think that's what they kind of were banking
Mm.
on was like, oh, well, you can go rent Aladdin at one of the Blockbusters and go see it there, and then we can get like, Blockbuster some revenue while we're selling these direct-to-video sequels. So who
I
knows?
see. Yeah, if only there were some kind of stream where you could stream the content at your any whim. They would call it Disney minus. I don't know.
Yeah, if only there was some sort of way to stream this series,
Well,
because
there
there
still
isn't.
isn't. Yeah, they
Just
still have not put
inexplicably.
Aladdin. They have still have not put Aladdin on Disney Plus, and I don't know why they're doing it. I have like some guesses. Like I know you were saying the other week, your theory was that even they don't know how to remove the Toon Disney logo from the side corner.
It's stuck on. You've either got to crop it up or you just forget the whole thing. They're at an impasse.
That'd be an amazing article, just like Aladdin not allowed on Disney Plus without blue Final Fantasy villain war filter or something.
There's some very overworked guy in the digital department who is like painstakingly photoshopping out the logo on 100 episodes of Aladdin. Where are you up to? I'm on Garden of Evil. I'm still got like 10 minutes of that one to go.
Right.
Martin,
and there were a lot of episodes of Aladdin too. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're okay. You're okay. Mine was a totally frivolous spit. It's fine.
Okay. But like in contrast to the Little Mermaid show, which had 3 seasons that each had like 10 to 12 episodes per season, Aladdin had like the full order of like a 64, 65 episode television series, and so did Hercules.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a bigger deal, a bigger undertaking to do with the Aladdin show than it was for the Little Mermaid, even though the Little Mermaid, I think, probably had better animation than Aladdin did, but it varied by episode to episode for sure. So
it's more consistent, isn't it? But
yeah.
I mean, it's it's the 90s, and it depends which studio you get. And sometimes you might be lucky enough to end up with the really nice studio, and other times you'll end up with whatever they're called, like Acom, who notorious for doing terrible animation through the 90s.
That's why there's like 2 studios that seem to have not remotely be on the same page as to what Mirage looks like.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
You get like
that's like the big
demonic
character that no one seemed to decide.
Demonic cat lady from hell or big cuddly cat face woman.
Very pronounced muzzle or Garfield.
Yes. Yeah.
No, but I do love Mirage so much. And that's one of the things that I really do appreciate about the Aladdin show, because I personally would have loved if they had kept Jafar around and used him in the TV show, but I think the lack of having him there led to a lot of really interesting and creative villains to come from the show, like Mirage, Mosenrath, Mechanicles, Abysmal, so on and so forth. Like I think they had to fill that void, and because of that, they ended up coming up with some really interesting characters.
They came up with so many great villains, Evan. In fact, let's make editing really hard for Martin and rapid fire off even more that he has.
No, don't do it.
They had Aziz. They had the Al Buddy. They had
Aminda Mula.
faster! We gotta make this really simple.
Captain Merc. Get Captain Merc in there.
Captain Merc, Arbitus, Malcho.
Just so many of them, and especially in comparison to the Hercules TV show, which we'll talk about later. But they had just so many more original villains for that show. Was the point I was making?
You might know more than me. In that Aladdin is based on the 101 Arabian Nights.
1001.
1001. Oh my god, that's a lot of Arabian Nights.
Yes.
Yeah, so that goes to show how little I know about it. I'm sure not all of these concepts were, but were at least some of them maybe lifted from those texts? Do you know anything about that?
Not. They didn't. I don't know a whole lot about. I just have like a very general knowledge of it. There's some ideas and concepts that they definitely pulled from Arabian folklore and mythology, like the Afrits, for example, that appeared in one episode or a couple episodes actually. So they didn't pull everything from Arabian mythology, but they pulled elements like the Afrits, which I mentioned before. They mentioned the ghouls for I Am a Ghoul was something that's endemic to Arabian mythology. But then they also did a lot of things that were just, I think, more in the spirit of it and tying more into like the sort of cosmic mythology that goes along with genies, for example. Like they brought in the Philosopher's Stone, which is a European folklore thing, but it also like kind of tied into possessing like all the powers of the cosmos, and Khartoum would use it to grow super large and rule the universe basically. And you had, just stuff like that, which was interesting. And I think what I really like and appreciate about the Aladdin cartoon is that it's a world that feels very full of magic and lore and mythology. And even when they're not necessarily pulling from just strictly Arabian mythology, it kind of has the effect of making this world feel even bigger, like there's just endless stories and endless adventures to be had in this universe.
I
It would
definitely
be
think like out of every Disney movie, Aladdin was the one that gives you the most setup for an episodic continuation.
Absolutely. And I think it's not the only one that is set after the events of the film, because The Legend of Tarzan is as well. But a lot of the ones that Disney put out that were based on the movies were like the Little Mermaid show and the Hercules show, which are more midquels or prequels. So the fact that we actually got sort of a sequel continuation that could go on basically forever and wasn't stuck in like an eternal middle or eternal beginning
Yeah.
kind of gave it the setup to be even more successful.
And it does feel a bit like, kind of like you guys were saying, Agrabah feels like just one corner of a massive world full of magic. But they never feel the need to do an episode that's like Aladdin goes to New York. It's like things would come visit Agrabah and recontextualize that in a way that always felt very organic, but kind of hinted at there being so much more to see elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they never really leave Agrabah, do they?
They go a few different places. Like they go to Getzistan, which is like a Las Vegas parody at one point. With Abbas Mall trying to take it over or trying to get it. Was that the Griffin Egg one? I don't remember. Sorry, tangent. But they go to a few different other lands, but a lot of it is very localized to Agrabah and the sort of ancient mythologies that are near that region. So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and specifically for purposes of, even though I'm sure we'll go off here and there into other episodes and tangents, specifically for purposes of this podcast, our Aladdin choice was Secret of Dagger Rock. One of the landmark episodes featuring one of the show's landmark villains, Mosenrath, which I imagine was no small part of our determination to choose it.
Oh, of course, you got to go with the Mosenrath episode. Like he's just the best villain that the show did. So.
Although I have to say, at the time, Abysmal was always my favorite as a kid. Always look forward to those Abysmal episodes.
There is a definite appeal to him, especially because Jason Alexander is just so effortlessly funny. So.
I mean, when they stuck him with Harood, I think was when he peaks, and that is a fantastic double act between those two.
Yeah, it's like Bert and Ernie, but evil. So
yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Abismal, oh great one. We were attacked by Aladdin and his genie.
But you had feathers!
What is it with Aladdin? Do I foil his plans? Whatever. Fine. No torture today. But tomorrow, I lop off your heads.
If you keep disposing of your men, sir, you won't have any left.
Do I tell you how to do your job?
Yes, you do.
That's because it's my job to tell you. Just wait till Agrabah trembles at my feet. I'll rule it like some big ruler guy with a hat.
Ah, yes, the plan. Well, let's hope it's every bit as successful as the test run.
Test run? There was a couple of guys. Let's see that kid and his genie fight a whole army of whirlwinds.
I think the real draw of Abismal is that because he was someone who was open to very different schemes, he was very malleable.
Yeah.
So you could have an episode where he like chases the heroes with a gun or something, which honestly happens.
It does happen.
I'm not joking. Via time travel, he gets gigantic like machine guns and is dressed like Rambo. Whereas, and that's why he's like on the opposite end of the equally powerful spectrum of Mosenrath, who brings forward, the most Aladdin flavored adventure you could maybe have, in that he is very strictly an explorer of magic, and he brings forward that sense of wanting to explore artifacts and mythos right there in Agrabah already. And I think that's how they kind of work as like the two very different but very how am I putting it? Very useful assets to have as villains in the show.
Yeah, you can use Abysmal for anything, can't you? Like, Abysmal has a new scheme to turn things to gold. And it's just like any scheme you can give to Abysmal, and it's fine, it works. It's just he happens to have that thing on hand that particular week. Whereas if you got like Mechanical's, all of his schemes are just based around robots and like, well, not robots, but like clockwork, robotic
Mechanisms, yeah.
mechanisms, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's kind
It's
of
kind
stuck
of in the
that
name,
corner.
mechanically, so.
Yeah, yeah. But he's another great one, though. I do love a good Mechanical's episode.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, like Tommy was saying, Mosenrath is such a good villain for like really delving into the lore and the mythos of the universe, because yeah, he ties into the genie so well because he's always trying to take the genie or take the genie's magic for himself, and that ends up being the setup for the Secret of Dagger Rock here, because he wants the genie to be delivered to him, but the genie is not on Aladdin and Jasmine's person when Mosenrath attacks, so he takes Aladdin captive in order to basically ransom for the genie.
Right. And this kind of allows for like what was probably an early Jasmine episode, because Aladdin has been shrunk down and taken, and it's kind of up to Jasmine to escort Genie and figure the whole thing out.
Which I think is a really cool direction, because in the movie, Jasmine herself, like, she's a great character, but she's not especially proactive or action oriented. Like, she kind of spends most of it just getting mad at other people and yelling at them. So in the TV show, we get to see a lot more of the other sides of her, to see her as a more well-rounded, more human figure, to see her more having an empathetic side, to see her having a more action side, and like the action side is like really on display here, because the Sultan doesn't believe that she should be going out to rescue Aladdin, but she is determined not to be left in the palace waiting for Razul to solve it, because he's Razul. So
Not gonna happen. Yeah.
he's Jim Cummings. Come on.
I mean, it is very much an ensemble show as well. Like, you retain all your movie characters apart from Jafar, and everybody sort of gets a moment to shine throughout this series. I think Gilbert Gottfried for me is the star of of like the cast, because he's great just to throw into an episode and give him a weird storyline and have him like paired up with like any variation of any character paired with Gilbert Gottfried. I keep calling him Gilbert Gottfried, Iago. Any like character you pair Iago with, you're in for an amazing episode. Because just like the back and forth and just having him like just raging angrily is always great.
Yeah, and I think one of the I'm sorry, Tommy, you go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, and I also feel what they do a good job with that ensemble is that it never feels like any of them are set dressing. I think you can find an episode devoted to each one, at least one, probably multiple. And I think each side character has almost like a new nemesis. You have like Genie and Mukhtar, you have Abu and Amindamula, you have Iago and Malcho. I don't know if there's ever like a magic carpet episode, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is.
Yeah, but one of the things I do really appreciate as well is that because this TV show was made in such close proximity to the original film, pretty much all of the original cast, sans Robin Williams, returns for the TV show. Like, you do have Gilbert Gottfried, you have Scott Weiner, you have Linda Larkin, you have Frank Welker, and so on and so forth. So it feels very authentic to the film because you've got the same people coming back for it.
I wonder if there's any universe in which they would have been able to get Robin Williams back to do the series.
I mean, if they didn't piss him off so badly,
yeah,
with
maybe
marketing, then maybe.
Yeah, he
I
might
don't know. I don't know if I'm going to say something like wildly unpopular. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I think Dan Castellaneta Genie is actually like maybe a really good fit for a cartoon in this sense. Because I feel when you're doing 22-minute episodes, it does kind of have to recontextualize how like Genie gags work and how he kind of functions into the story.
Yeah.
And his shtick sometimes, like when Robin Williams is in theatrical Aladdin, he's always you have a lot of budget to do really stunning things that if you tried to emulate it in a cartoon might not go over the same way. I don't know if I'm making a ton of sense. Whereas Dan has like, it feels like maybe smaller gags, but they kind of suit his take on Genie and what they're going for a little bit differently.
I think you are absolutely correct. And I think if there was a universe in which Robin Williams did this series, there would probably be like 5,000 hours of Robin Williams outtakes that they couldn't use or didn't have the budget to animate. He's just gone between 5 different celebrities. It's the entire animation budget for 3 years. We can't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not.
I was just gonna say that Dan did a really good job matching Robin's inflections in a way that I think, it's not an exact match, but it's pretty good. And I think that, after you watch the show and you watch the sequels and the Disney park stuff and whatnot, Dan Castellaneta as the Genie kind of just becomes a default. Like you understand that, he's a replacement, but he's such a commonly used one and such a well used one that he has his own vibe to Genie that I think is very endearing. So, yeah,
absolutely.
At Radigan, eh? Well, I'll show you how a real hunter deals with a rat. Well, there I go. I've gotten carried away and alienated everyone again.
And on topic of voices, we also have more specific to this episode, we have Jonathan Brandis as the voice of Mosenrath, who I mostly know as like a really big child star of around that time in like Neverending Story 2 and Ladybugs and a lot of like, just like older kids movies. But I think he's at least like a young adult here as he records these.
Yes, this is teen heartthrob Jonathan Brandis.
Oh.
Evil teen heartthrob Jonathan Brandis.
Yes.
Which is the best kind of heartthrob, just ultimate evil.
I think he does a terrific job. I think they spent a lot of extra time punching up his dialogue because it's like, this isn't another villain that Jim Cummings is going to do the voice of for the dozenth time. We need to write something like really juicy if we're going to have Jonathan Brandis in the booth. And you just have like, really good, really intentional dialogue that way. And I think that's no small part of what helps Mosenrath be so memorable.
Well, you can tell that they hit upon their arch villain Jafar substitute, I think, for the show when they found him, because he shows up like quite a way, I want to say, into that first season, like maybe about halfway through, and then after that it feels like he shows up every couple of episodes. I think he's only in like 8 overall.
I think
something
9.
like that. 9.
It's 9. Yeah.
Which, comparatively not a vast amount, but he does feel like he's in it a lot. I think Abysmal gets like 13, 14.
Yeah.
So like in like half the time, he nearly manages to eclipse Abysmal as the most reoccurring villain. So clearly people loved him behind the scenes.
Yeah, and Jonathan Brandis. Why are they both Jonathans? What is this? What is this Aladdin arch villain thing with Jonathan? But Jonathan Brandis did like an interview based on this show for a newspaper that you can find online. And it's interesting to hear someone talk about like the Aladdin TV show from the time period, and you can just tell that he absolutely loved getting the chance to play a villain and just to have a more diverse role in Hollywood, because I think he felt kind of typecast and pigeonholed in like the certain roles that he was getting. And so getting the chance to do such an over-the-top theatrical villain was such a fun experience for him to do. Just very refreshing.
There's one episode where you can really feel his absence. Is it Jeff Bennett that Matt has to voice match him?
Yes.
Which is no easy task, because like in this episode alone, it's like 3 of the biggest banger Mosenrath threats Like the one I think of is have you forgotten how excruciatingly powerful I said it wrong.
Oh,
Crap.
yeah.
Not
Are you
powerful, my
clear
power.
on how excruciatingly
Painful.
painful my powers can be?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just putting his whole like evil spirit into that delivery with animation to match too. I don't think there's like a lousy looking Mosenrath episode because he's such a like intricately detailed character. He's got like the cape and like all kinds of bells and whistles all over him that in his best moments are always moving really fluidly. So he's a character they knew had to be treated very lovingly.
He's got the flounce. He absolutely flounces the belt.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely notice the Jeff Bennett difference. As much as I love Jeff Bennett, it's like those episodes of Turtles where you'd replace James Avery with Jim Cummings, funnily enough. And like, Jim Cummings perfectly, amazing voice actor, but you would very much notice the difference. Like the delivery, I think, that Brandis puts into everything, just like the sheer effort and the personality that goes into those lines, you can tell that it's not him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but it's lost me. We're talking about Mosenrath. Oh, I want to ask, and I feel like we've touched on this, off cast, but for the audiences at home, there is that rumor that Aladdin 3 was supposed to reunite Aladdin and Mosenrath and reveal that they've been brothers all along. Can you speak to how erroneous or otherwise that production deal is?
Yeah, like there's just no evidence of that. I don't think that that was ever really something that was in the cards, because a lot of people say, oh well, they didn't include it because, I guess, trigger warning here, Jonathan Brandis did commit suicide later in life. But the Aladdin and the King of Thieves came out long before that happened. So
Mhm.
it was not something that him doing that to himself would have hampered or would have impeded their plans for. Uh, but to be fair, we also don't have a whole lot of behind the scenes information on the sequels and the television shows. Because those things were seen as very disposable by Disney, whereas like with the animated features, everything is so intricately archived and preserved that that you couldn't even imagine like losing like a single like piece of concept art from those things. But so much of what was done for the Aladdin TV show and like the original ideas and for the sequels and whatnot was just thrown away. Like it's like that stuff was not preserved um the way that the feature length films were. So who knows? There could have been a time where they were pitching the idea of having Mosenrath be the main villain, but we just don't really have any evidence of that, any solid proof that that was ever in the cards, and I honestly kind of doubt it as well. So
Mhm.
I believe I did see something official. I want to say in the last couple of years from maybe one of the creators on Twitter or something during a Q&A, where someone had asked them, was Mosenrath meant to be the villain in King of Thieves or Aladdin's brother? And they very much came out and said, no, it was never considered. We considered like a different villain, but it was never at any point was it going to be Mosenrath. So yeah, I would agree. I think it's pure fan speculation, wishful thinking.
Yeah.
And I wonder
it'd
if
be
people
cool,
get
but
it would be cool. I wonder if people get kind of carried away with the fact that Aladdin and Mosenrath do have some physical resemblances. But I
Yeah.
think that's more chalked up to one, just the art style of the show, in that Mosenrath is like the first uh young human man we have besides Aladdin, because his supporting cast this whole time has been a monkey and a parrot and a carpet. And so when you see another young man of similar stature and background drawn in that style, it's gonna look a little like Aladdin. And
Yeah.
from there, any similarities can also be chalked up to the fact that they are foils, and that's kind of the point of
Yeah.
two characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think especially too the thing to go along with that as well is that Aladdin and Mosenrath, and especially this is true in The Secret of Dagger Rock, just have this fantastic chemistry with one another and play off each other so effortlessly. So that's why I think you get a lot of oh, are they brothers? Are they brothers who like secretly like hate each other and that's why they have such good chemistry? But you also get in other fandom circles, you get, oh well, does Mosenrath have like like a sexual fascination with Aladdin? Is it like a romantic thing? Is it is it something we could ship or whatnot? And I think it just speaks to the fact that they're just two such interesting characters who play off each other in such a powerful way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, Mosenrath being like, what do you mean your other nemesises don't like bind you and hoist you by your wrists with Matt? What are you talking? I don't think that's weird. I don't know what you mean.
Right, he's got him tied up with black sand throughout this entire episode, and like keeps on messing with him while he's up there. So it's definitely got some homoerotic subtext there for sure. So.
My orders to the princess were simple. The lamp was to be mine by nightfall.
Princess Jasmine doesn't take orders from anybody.
That being the case, I'm thinking that I should keep my end of the bargain. It's been nice knowing you, Aladdin. Then again, no, it hasn't.
I'd have loved a Mosenrath third movie. I think that would have been better than, not to disparage the King of Thieves, but I find the King of Thieves largely forgettable. But I would have loved, he certainly would have been a better villain than Saluk.
Although Saluk does have like one of the best like Disney villain deaths, like being just turned to solid gold. Like I just love that moment.
While screaming. Like...
Yes, it's so gruesome. I love
it. He has a good song too. I can't say too much about Saluk, but I would have preferred, like, if they were going to do that third movie to cap off the series, I would have liked at least one of the villains from the series to show up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe like a big Legion of Doom situation where they all team up together.
That would have been really cool. Yeah, the closest this show gets to doing that is I guess it's mostly when Abismal and Mechanicles team up. And I guess you could kind of make an argument for like Mirage and Chaos, but there's never like a huge team up. I wonder if no small part of that is that it is a lot of prolific voice actors, and it'd be hard to get Jason Alexander and Jonathan Brandis and Charlie Adler, and the list goes on.
Newworth,
yeah.
Just like we're already spending like our like $2 budget for each episode. Like, there's only so far the dollar could go.
There'd be one or two who just like wouldn't be allowed to talk, or they like reuse audio from another episode.
That's always one of the budget saving techniques. Always noticed that in like G.I. Joe. I'm like, why hasn't the Baroness said anything this entire episode? She's been standing there in the background. Like, they have not even animated her.
She just exists.
Yeah.
Man, and I guess what this episode does that the show takes a lot of opportunities to do is kind of build on what a genie is and their lore, in that they introduce the Crystal of Ix, which is a really cool like device that can absorb magic creatures and house their power. And I feel like there's like a really good handful of episodes where we're going to explore one of the 10 things a genie is afraid of. Of course, that comes in really big with like the Mukhtar later on and a few other things. But this is the big thing where it's like, the original Aladdin has that fairy tale nature where it's like, it's a genie, he's in a lamp, you don't have to ask that many questions. But when you do expand it into a whole series, it leaves a lot of room to say, we can create a cool like tower of dark blue gemstone that casts a searchlight and can like suck up a genie and use their strength against other people.
Oh yeah, and then like when Mosenrath destroys the dagger rock that's around the Crystal of Ix, like the way that he flies around it, like gripping onto the side of it as the rock, like that glowing green light like bursts through, is one of the best animated things in this entire series. Like, that's where the budget for this episode probably went to. But it's so cool. It's such a cool moment.
This is the best studio, I think, who did this one, and they also do the first bit of Return of Jafar. The Mirage episode, the name I now I forget, like Secret of the
Lost Ones.
The Lost Ones, yes, they did that one. They do like the first Bismarck episode. They do a few, but like they are the ones that look, I think, the best, and like not even very close to the movie animation. They've got their own distinct style, but it always
Right,
looks
yeah.
really good, and they always manage to make it look a bit sort of darker, more visually impressive. Yeah, when you know you've got a good episode when you see that studio is working on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this episode kind of wraps up. Jasmine help largely saves the day. I want, does Jasmine have a bigger nemesis personally than Mosenrath with this episode in mind?
Bigger, I don't know if I'd necessarily say bigger than Mosenrath, but Mosenrath is definitely more oriented towards Aladdin. Jasmine does get some other nemesis throughout the show, like she gets Celine the mermaid, who has the crush on Aladdin, and it's kind of like the romantic foil trying to get in between. And then she's got the what are they called in this? They're the parody of the Amazons, the Gallifims. That's what they're called.
Yeah,
like where she gets like recruited into the Gallifims with the queen who has the crush on the Sultan. So there's that.
Oh yeah. Who's the
a lot of Sultan background in this cartoon as well?
Yes.
I love the episode where the Sultan gets like that big suit of armor that makes him go insane. Like,
yes.
I think that's one of the very last episodes. But like just the fact that the Sultan gets an episode to himself is fun.
Well, and there's so much like in the movie too. Sultan is like barely north of a comedic relief character. He of course plays an important part. He is a fully realized character, but he is rather silly at the end of the day. And then the Aladdin series throws stuff at you like he has a debt to a botany spirit who's gonna take what he values most for his past sins.
I kept that quiet all those years.
Yeah.
When has Jafar ever asked him about that? What's this bizarre contract I've just found? Don't worry about that, Jafar. Just put it back where you found it.
Well, if Jafar had waited like maybe a few months, depending on how long you consider, Arbitus would have come along and like done it all for him.
See, my headcanon that I've had for a long time is that because the TV show has such an influx of all of these random villains, and like I think Martin actually might have been the first one to bring this up to me, but maybe like the fact that Jafar was such a strong presence that he kind of deterred all the crazies. So maybe Arbitus was just like, I can't get into the palace while Jafar is there, so I'm just gonna bide my time. Eventually, he's gonna like play his hand, and then I can swoop in to get Jasmine.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. That man, and he's the one who, sorry.
I was just saying, like, things seemed a lot more stable under Jafar. Like, nobody was like, there's a new villain every single week after Jafar goes, who tries to take over the city or builds a giant robot or unleashes an army of mudmen. And when Jafar was in control, like, everyone seemed pretty okay. Like
living in poverty, but they're fine.
Yeah,
they still are in this show. Like, nobody solves that problem.
Jasmine tries to in one episode, but it's not. Well, in the one where she gets turned into a rat, like she sees like the different sides of like the poverty. She's like, we have to do something about all the poor people in Agrabah. And the Sultan's like, there's poor people in Agrabah. Just totally oblivious to it.
That seems like very appropriate for the character, though.
And with Jafar knowing so much about magic, if he saw like the I am a ghoul charm that summons him before anyone put it on, he'd be like, no, I should keep this. This is fine. For a good time, I should do some experiments. And just like hold on to it for a rainy day when he would need it.
Yeah, because he did that with with the Eye of Gazim that opens the portal to the Netherworld that Iamagul uses in another episode. Like they straight up found it like hidden behind a wall in Jafar's study. Like he had that put away. He's just like, nope, that's for the sequels. We're not going to touch that.
Yeah.
I forgot that they revisit Jafar's like laboratory lair, don't they? And is it just that one episode, or do they ever go?
They do it a few times whenever they need like a magic solution on hand that the genie doesn't know. They go raid Jafar's laboratory.
Is there no respect for the dead?
And there's that awkward aspect too, where it's like, well, we all live together, but no one wants to like sleep in Jafar's room.
Not gonna renovate it.
No. So, as a segue, kind of, unless we have something crucial more to cover about Aladdin, specifically.
I'm good.
Well,
All right.
we usually do before we continue.
Yeah.
An honorable mention of our favorite episodes, I
Oh,
think.
sure,
Ooh,
sure.
yeah.
Over to one of you. I will not designate which one of you, as I like to be difficult.
Well, no, I have so many that I really love from the series, but the ones that immediately come to mind that I really love and appreciate were Eye of the Beholder, which was a Mirage focused episode where Aladdin and Jasmine both get turned into snakes and they have to prove that they still love each other to break the
Hmm.
spell. I thought that was a really good Aladdin and Jasmine centric episode. I also loved See No Evil, which is I Am a Ghoul focused. It's where they had the sunken ship that had the portal to the Netherworld on
Oh, yeah.
the hull of the ship, and I just really liked that one because it had this really cool opening narration by Tony J. And whenever you put Tony J in anything, it instantly has like this feeling of gravitas
Oh,
and
yeah.
mythology that's just super cool. And then the last one I'll bring up was the Lost City of the Sun, which is the one where we find out that Mosenrath has that emaciated skeletal hand underneath his gauntlet, where he's trying to find the power of Shamash in the desert. And I just think that one is really fun for getting his personality and getting a lot of good one-liners like, well, it appears Shamash had quite a sense of humor when he finds like a whole desert buried with statues of pointing hands that he's looking
Yes.
for. So those are my favorites to revisit every time.
Yeah, I find myself I think the flawed couple might be my personal favorite. Partly because I like Abismal and Mechanicles a lot as bad guys. And it is like we kind of discussed, it is like the closest they come to having like a team up. And I wonder if any two more threatening villains teamed up, I think it would be just too much for Aladdin. They're like Abismal and
Yes.
Mechanicles can be all right.
Yeah.
And the episode turns out very funny. It focuses on the mood stones, I believe they're called,
Mhm.
where when you pick it up, it accentuates, a personality or flaw, and it gives the characters that don't always get to be comedic relief a chance to be very funny. I think Jasmine has one the whole time that makes her very envious. So throughout the whole
Yes.
episode, she's like, "Why can't I have an evil lair? Why can't I have this?" And lets them write her in a way they don't always. And same with all of them. And you've got like Jason Alexander and Charlie Adler sharing evil laugh space, and it's
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah, that one and the Arbitus episode too, I think are
Mhm.
Arbitus being on the total opposite end of the spectrum for reasons I discussed earlier, and it does just have this very, you know, thought very thought like I feel like every 90s cartoon had like a vaguely environmental episode, and
Yeah.
Arbitus was a little bit their nod to that. And it kind of gave them this chance to create a villain who was a little more sympathetic and was kind of someone that the heroes would show some remorse toward, like, oh well, I don't know if he was so bad all along. I thought that was and he's just a very cool design. Much like Mosenrath, he's like exquisitely detailed, and like I do want to imagine a world where we see these characters in like a theatrical quality, where it's like just imagine the filter put on them where they have the painted colors of like Aladdin the movie, and
Yeah.
all those detailed pieces are moving in rhythm, and it like they designed these characters with that mentality without being worried that the TV quality would hold them back. And I think a lot of them, beg your pardon, are like all the better for it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think apart from the two the ones that you guys have already mentioned, like a couple of mine would be on there as well. I really do like that. I've forgotten the name of it again. The Mirage episode.
The Lost Ones.
The last ones. Like the animation on that one and the mood and the way that Mirage is animated, all lend themselves really well to what is like it's kind of like a horror episode. It's really
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
creepy, and the kids are turning into monsters, and she's taking people through like portals. Terrifying, like a really sort of dark looking one. The flawed couple I also really enjoy. And I think, like, just thinking of Mosenrath episodes, like a lot of them are really good. But I mean, apart from the obvious one that we've already discussed, I really like Two to Tangle, which is I think his final episode in the series, which is about him, like he's literally dying and he's trying to swap bodies with Aladdin. And I always really liked that aspect of Mosenrath's character where he's literally worn away like his own flesh to a skeleton, and it's left him dying, but he won't give up the gauntlet. And that episode kind of ends with, I guess he gets put back into his own body, and I guess the implication is that he will continue to die. I don't know. It's kind of left open-ended, and that's the last time you ever see him in canon. But I do enjoy like a desperate villain trying to body swap and survive episode. That's one of my favorite tropes.
Little sympathetic for the immortality freak, you know?
Yes, always.
Yes.
Pack your shields, pack your sword. You won't ever get bored. They'll get beaten. Oh, God, you might. Arm on down, stop on by. Hop a carpet and fly to another Arabian night.